ago now. We're like, hey, we need some more help for parents, and so we're like, let's do more help. We talked about how this aligns with the district's strategic plan. We've talked about how we do projects. We've talked about how students should do self-directed learning and work on focus areas. And today we're going to talk about differentiation, and kind of twofold, right? Like, how do we differentiate between kids with 504s and IEPs? And then how do you just differentiate for those kids who don't have that stuff, but you clearly need to help that student thrive? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And as always, please ask your questions right away. So we have like a right on time delivery model. I think we all know each other by now. Is that true? We've all been in here a number of times. Good morning, Mrs. Whiteman.
Hello. These are people that get the diplomas.
They get their diplomas today.
Thank you all for being
You can put it on your refrigerator.
It's my first one, guys. I'm just gonna
This is your second one. This is your second one.
Other one, you want to Google?
We have
I'm 7 for 7.
bookmarks, and I could get y'all shoelaces too.
Well, we have a lot of shoelaces.
Yeah, you could even pick your color.
You could pick your colors.
So we do this thing called the shoelace challenge. So, you want to show them?
Go ahead.
The video or the?
No,
I don't
I'll
have
get
a shoelace
I'll get
with
you
me.
the shoelaces.
So when we went to this is actually totally in line with what we're doing. So we went
We all
to
can do it.
when we presented in DC for the Model Schools Conference as an innovative school district. We wanted people to do something that would stick and remember what we did. And so Melanie, who knows all these crazy cool ideas, she found this thing called the Shoelace Challenge. And so what we would do, and I'll show you when she gets pick the shoelace, is we would give everyone in the room a shoelace and then ask you to tie a shoe around your leg. And most of us, I'm convinced, know how to tie their shoes, right? I know sandals are super prevalent. I'm not allowed to wear sandals in the high school. He doesn't want me to wear sandals. Not a good look for the ladies wear sandals. It's okay. A little sexist. But so
Their toenails look a lot better than yours.
probably true. So they probably we did this, and there's we're gonna actually do this or no?
Yes.
All right, we'll actually do this. Okay, and you have to take the shoelace home though. That's part of this because we bought 1,000.
Pick a color. Pick a color.
Oh, they have to pick colors. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can pick
Oh,
colors.
Susie.
That's all part of it. Janice, you haven't tried
I
this.
need an
They're all like, I love the name. What do you want to wear?
It's
Yeah, have you done
Jazzy B
this?
or somebody.
I'll pick the one face to this.
Actually need new shoelaces.
Well, there are another pink one. Melanie has hundreds of shoelaces. And we all were fancy, we all bought ourselves some Chuck Taylors and had multiple color shoelaces. And so if you tie your shoe, right, most of us know the maybe around the tree through the hole kind of strategy, right? This is something that I bet most of you can do without looking, you can tie your shoes, right? And then we'd have a battle royale of who could tie their shoes the fastest. And it was fairly intense with a lot of teachers. I mean, correct, Melanie? It was
They were at it. They were
So
going
it
down.
turns out though that there's another way to tie your shoes that is faster than the way that we've all been taught, and it actually works better than the way you've been taught. So we all practiced. Turns out Bill was the best, so he's a little bit competitive himself. So if you take this and you just wrap your fingers around this and then go through the middle and pull, you can actually tie it very quickly. So we then had the fastest person in the room go up against Bill, and he would school them. And they're like, well, how does this guy have this unbelievable shoe tying ability? So we'd show the video. I don't know if you found the video. So we'll put it on the webpage or something. But anyways, the point of it is there's things that we think there's only one way to do well, and as basic as tying one's shoes.
I did find it.
And it turns out that there's more than one way to tie your shoes. Is this Yazzie B?
I got this one right.
It's super credible when you get videos up YouTube from Yazzie B. You have the helm now if you can,
Okay.
or I can just
Let me get
61.
61.
No, not that one.
Well, everybody know I have a Band-Aid on my finger, so I need to start early compared to everybody else.
Well,
Yes,
that's-
it's a Toy Story Band-Aid, because that's all I had in my house, thank you very much.
Oh, Mr. Yazzie B, my apologies.
Yeah, I couldn't find it.
And he
Can't
did
hear
wear a
now.
beanie on it.
Hold on.
This could be this volume too, if we use the volume here.
Let's try again.
Actually, there's no, there are no batteries in this, I don't know why I'm using it.
Oh, I hope there's volume, because I have videos to show.
I don't know. Which of these is volume?
Tech issues, right?
Oh, no, the volume's on.
No?
No. I don't know, I'll have to find batteries.
All he really says is I'm gonna show you how to
Yeah,
tie
so
the
here's-
shoe.
Watch. Watching.
So he ties the shoe in 1 second. So, it's actually pretty easy once you get the hang of it. I spent a lot of the time, like, waiting in airports and stuff, practicing, like, trying to tie my shoe this way. So, and once you get it, it works. So, yeah, you're
We
not.
can have
muted,
lessons
right?
after if you.
Yeah, we'll have a special session.
I'm not really paying attention now.
Let's see if-
See if you can get volume, because I have videos I wanna show.
All right.
Okay, well
Let me
anyways,
disconnect.
I will disconnect. It's secret, it's special, but it's really.
I was going to do this
And if
activity
you need a
with,
pair, take the other.
I'll take them for the AP Bio class if you want me to.
There's more.
So, good morning.
We got that.
Are you disconnected?
Hi.
Did you buy these on Amazon, or did you?
I bought them on
Walmart,
Amazon.
like, no, Walmart, but
Amazon.
Yeah.
The best price.
there you go.
I read all the reviews. No, I'm good because,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to leave a little earlier.
you know, you have to get the best quality for the best price. So Luann Bean and I were like, oh, this one. If anybody had seen us doing it, they would have thought we were totally off task, but.
Yeah, we don't have volume on this projector, somebody called Graham.
Okay, well, we'll do volume on mine, and you'll show the video. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what else to do. So,
Figure it out.
yeah, okay,
I'll figure it out. Why don't you
I'll start presenting.
All right, so there's different ways to do things. We're gonna bring it all back together. There's different ways to do things, even when you think there's only one way to do something, even something as simple as tying your shoes, which I think students are losing because they wear slides like almost all the time. There's more than a way to do that stuff. Are you
So,
taking it away?
I am. So this first visual that I put up is just a really good representation of some vocabulary that you hear tossed around when you think of intervention. There is differentiation, accommodation, and modification, and we're gonna go through those a little bit this morning to help clarify any misconceptions. But as you can see, this first one is everyone gets to have a choice. They can go in the box or not. Same supports. The second one is they get what they need to help them. The third one is just removing all barriers to help them access what they need for learning, okay? The next video that we're gonna show,
Or hopefully show.
I'm gonna do video, or the audio, I don't know any other way to do it, but I'd like to show this because,
It's the projector, so I don't know.
okay.
This video is very good though.
These videos are very good, and they kind of go along with what.
Hi, my name is Shelley Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of British
I
Columbia.
can't play videos on my computer.
As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our
Move
classrooms,
to the middle of the
which
room.
still segregate students by ability, especially students with developmental disabilities. There's a gap in our understanding of what we know inclusive education to be philosophically versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I gonna explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try to describe this, or we could have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay, because you haven't done it. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle, and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end, and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split, and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball is the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are our kids who need the most support, and our kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head.
Hi, my name is Shelly Moore, and I'm a third.
Teach the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to. The kids with autism, kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with Universal Design for Learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
So, bowling is a good analogy. Time to change our aim, making sure we're providing options for all students.
Let's use your computer because mine's not playing videos.
That's fine.
You can use mine for notes then.
So, thank you. I apologize with all the tech issues this morning, but sometimes this happens in the classroom. And especially being an intervention specialist, we have to be flexible, we have to be able to provide options quickly and kind of roll with whatever our date presents with us. So this is a perfect example of what we encounter in the classroom pretty much on a weekly or daily basis.
Where did it go? Oh, I got you.
You got it?
You were way ahead.
Okay, all right. So, the video talks about how adjusting our aim is really important, making sure that we are getting to those side pins. We have our students that are gifted and we have our students that need a little more support. And so by changing our aim, those supports will benefit all of our students. There is something called Universal Design for Learning, and I forget how long this has been around. Maybe like 10 years? 20 years. Okay. So this really is a way of thinking that all supports and all students have an equal opportunity to succeed. They have flexibility, they have choices in their learning to help show what they know and engage with the material. Okay, so our lesson plans need to reflect that, and this is for all students, not just students who are on specialized plans. Okay, I'm going to show you another really cool video, and this talks about average, and my husband said don't say this too many times, don't shit on me. But the end of average, if you think about it, what student is just average? We're all individual, and this is a good example of what that looks like. Thank you.
Now I have to make sure.
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, helpful videos in 5 minutes or less that support the teaching and learning of all students. I am your host, Shelly Moore, and this episode is Don't Shut on Me. Today, we're we're going back to my dots because I love my dots. I told you I'm obsessed with my dots. But our question for today about the dots is, have you ever wondered where this idea of green came from? I mean, what does it even mean to be green? The idea of greenness is a very early concept in education that is connected to standardization. And to understand standardization in education, we have to go back to the Industrial Revolution. Way back when, there was a flood of people moving to cities to work in factories. And to be successful in a factory, consistency was the key. The more similar and consistent your workers were, the more reliable and safe your product was. In a factory setting, the greener, the better. Public education was then created and designed with exactly this idea in mind. And it recreated conditions in schools to mimic the conditions in factories. So when kids became adults, they would have the skills to be successful as factory workers. It makes perfect sense. It was the demand at the time, and it's quite a smart strategy if you ask me. And so schools were created, and students were taught how to be green. They were taught to do the same thing, to work alone, to sit in rows, to respond to bells. Sounding a little familiar. Now, I don't know about you, but I was not a very green child, and I often struggled in school because I wasn't good at any of those things. I mean, I'm creative, I hate rules, I don't like working alone, I'm pretty much always late. This is pretty much an educational recipe for disaster. I prefer windows of arrival time. I had difficulty articulating this tension for a really long time, and I just really thought I was broken. It took me almost until I was 27 to finally realize that it was actually not me that was broken, but I was trying to exist in a very broken educational system. This happens to so many of us students and teachers who are still being expected to fit into this 19th century model of society when we are very, very much being propelled into the 21st century at warp speed. I mean, kids are born knowing how to double tap. Education is close to 200 years off the mark, and more kids are struggling to fit into this archaic system. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. So if you, like me, grew up as a multicolored, three-dimensional unicorn of twirling love, you also probably struggled in school. You may have also noticed that you got a few phone calls received by your mother that may have involved this word, should. This is where Shelley should be. This is what Shelley should be doing. This is the reading benchmark that Shelley should be reading at. I was shoulded on to death. Now, I saw a t-shirt once that said, don't shit on me, and let me tell you, this could be the new slogan of education systems worldwide. So here's my challenge for you. How would your classroom or school change if that's all we did? Let's take out the should. Let's change our question from where should you be, what's wrong with you, to where are you now, and what's your next step? Can you imagine how successful kids would be and how school would change if that was the language that we used? But in order for this to happen, we have to do one very important job, but it's a hard one because we did not grow up this way. We have to let go of average. We have to let go of the comparison and the competition and this expectation that kids need to be something other than exactly who they are. And even more, we have to give ourselves permission to do exactly the same thing. Because just like there isn't a standard kid, there's also no standardized teacher. Don't shit on yourself either. Well, there you have it. That is today's 5 more minutes. How is this useful for you? Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And remember to take a look on www.5moreminutes.com to check out supplemental readings.
So Shelley Moore is an intervention specialist that is really awesome, and I follow her because I am really inspired by her. But also she's a big advocate for inclusion and this universal design for learning. She's presented at many conferences, she's done research, she's in the process of actually putting this big research project together on this. So I'm really, I study a lot of what she does and I try to practice it because I think it's really good stuff. So where are our students now and what is the next step? And we can say this for pretty much all of our students, not just the students on those end caps, okay? So universal design for learning has 3 parts. We want to be able to provide multiple opportunities for that student to understand why they need to learn this. And that's part of their limbic system. This first section here, the green, that would be like, where are their feelings, how are their personal stories and their experiences able to bring in and connect to the new learning. So they want to understand, why is this important in my real world? The next thing, the next part of the brain, is the representation. We want to provide multiple means for what they're learning. Some students like a visual, some students want to read it, some students want to hear it. So we want to make sure that we access all those different senses, and the students are able to show and hear all different ways of what they will be learning. The last area is to provide means for how they're going to present their learning. What is their product? What is the thing they're going to show that they understand the learning? And that will be in your frontal lobe. So these three areas of the brain, it's really activating, and it's a lot of work for students who struggle in learning to make sure they're able to engage in the learning. But we need to provide those opportunities so that they can access it.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Please, absolutely.
Just as hard for the kids is for adults to jump into this style of education as well. So a lot of us are used to exactly what Shelley described. You know, we call like the sitting and getting type approach, where we're talking and all the kids are stationary, or the sage on the stage style of education where the teacher's in front just giving. It is a very big challenge for a lot of educators to switch from letting people just be a little bit chaotic and be wherever they need to be. And that, I think, with a lot of the struggles, as we all enter this stuff of education differently, that's one of the hardest and biggest struggles, is the adults, both parents and teachers, giving up some control to the kid. And your kids will get this sooner than you will, and that's scary. It's scary to know that they're gonna be the rock stars of their education sooner than you'll get it. I mean, you guys you've been here, you've been to all our sessions and all that kind of stuff, so you'll be ahead of the vast majority of people around the country who education's shifting. So this is different.
Can you click on the picture too, because I want to show them. There's a, just at the top, the umbrella one is fine. This is going to take us to the UDL website. It's by CAST. And there are so many, if you scroll a little bit, there is a chart here that also gives you, do you want to zoom in just a smidgen? There, perfect. Gives us lots of different ideas to help that student build or access or internalize different information, how to give representation of the knowledge, and then how to express it and how to act on that knowledge. And this is something we've shared with all of our teachers as well. So this is a really cool website to look at, and it also covers executive functions, and we'll go into that a little bit too. So just wanted to show you that website. It's really cool.
Lori, I just might interject very quickly that Universal Design for Learning is a major initiative of the United States Department of Education and also of the Ohio Department of Education. In fact, as Mrs. Price knows, that we will engage with its principles and practices is written into our continuous improvement plan.
Awesome.
Which has to be approved in Columbus before we are funded. So we didn't invent this. We didn't like pull it out of a hat or trip over it or something. This is legit, way legit.
So all
Perhaps
teachers, all teachers should be intentionally implementing these strategies into their projects, into their focus areas with their students in mind.
But it's not something like, well, obviously with my vintage, it's not something that I was taught in teacher school.
Right.
And actually, I don't think it really became part of pedagogical preparation until after you all, right?
That's what,
We're out of
so like
school,
I've been
too.
teaching 10 years, we did not learn this.
Right.
I would say the concept differentiation was presented when I was at CSU, that's like 2005-ish, but it was only geared towards students with special needs, not towards all students. How do you help all students thrive? And I started teaching with, I do this for everybody, I do this for these 5 kids, and this usually was removing half of the multiple choice options, which I don't understand why I used to do that. And then now that more I've done this, the more I've got to hang out with Lori and been exposed to, we do this for everyone. We
lot-
try to do this
A
for
lot of it has followed the evolution of brain science.
Yeah.
When they became able to take a picture of what was going on in a student's brain, like while you're learning to read, or if you're dyslexic, while you're struggling to read, they could actually see what was happening, then it became a lot more precise. It's really amazing.
The
Thank you
brain-
for bringing, yeah.
No, the brain is
Well, UDL's work
so
around the brain
awesome.
and learning to read, learning to process information. Thank you for including this.
Oh, absolutely.
This is why a lot of us get upset when everyone's like, we should just return to the way that we did it. We really know that that isn't best practice anymore. Like it's comfortable for adults, but it's not effective for all kids. Some kids still learn well with the old school approach, but some, as Shelley pointed out, they're left on the outside.
And that's really not even Summit, it's for all school, all classes. It's not Summit based or, we really should be doing this regardless of what we use. Okay, so I thought it was important. Differentiation is what we do for all learners. And my little sign up here just shows, make sure you know the student really well. And we have that social emotional learning that now is in law, that all districts have to have curriculum to that. And it help our students grow in that area. So differentiation, I found this really nice visual here, and actually we can make it bigger if you click on it. But it's tailoring instruction to meet the individual needs of the learner. And in these 4 areas, making sure the content is something that they can grasp, and we present it in multiple ways. Making sure that the student can acquire the information and they can process it, so offering different ways for them to process it. Giving them different ways for them to produce a product. So I know Mr. Bruning talked about in the past, somebody built was it Fortnite World? Or
Yeah.
It was the
Great
coolest
New
thing.
World
Like I
Fortnite.
never even would have thought of that, but that was their idea, their choice, and they were able to show their learning through using a technology that they're really, very good at. And then this is something that not all of our students have full control over. The learning environment, they want to listen to like rap music and talking to their friends, watching a video. Sometimes that's just not the best thing for them. So making sure their environment is a good environment for learning, making sure we have flexible seating so we can move students around if we need to, and providing that most comfortable learning environment for them. If they're taking an assessment, making sure we can see their screen, all those things that we need to be very intentional with, okay?
Some kids love laying on the floor in the
They do.
hallway, which we find disgusting.
They do.
But and I'm like, I'm gonna tell you it's dirty, it's gross, I'm the bio teacher, like I don't know how the last time that was in any way, like, it may have been swept, but not clean, they're like, I don't care, I just feel comfortable this way, I'm like, okay. Like, so, like, if you come through the building, you may see kids laying on the floor.
I asked why they did that once, and they said they were hot and it cooled them down. And I was like, okay, now I get it, right?
Now
Like,
I-
it was an ideal environment. They were improving their environment. I got it. Still a little grossed out, but okay. So, differentiation was for all students. Accommodation and modification is typically for students who are on 504s or IEPs or on the gifted spectrum, which would be for WELPs. And for accommodations,
Weps and WEPs.
what?
WEPs and WEPs.
Okay, I was like, I know there's a WELP or something like that. So this kind of explains a little bit about it. I'm gonna kind of just give you an overview. Accommodations are being able to do the same curriculum with their peers, that they have the same learning outcome as their peers. They're in the general education classroom and they're using the same technology tools to access the curriculum, learning the same content, and the grading is the same. We're just providing, maybe they need a pull-out situation to have a quieter place for their testing. Or they need things a little more time to get their work done. So they're accommodated for those needs. The modifications would be for a student who is having a little more struggles academically. They have some more needs, significant learning needs, and we still want them to produce information and product as closely to and as independently as possible. But we need to probably lower what our expectations are for them and align it to the data that we get from the IEPs. So they have different learning outcomes than their peers. They also can be in the general education classroom, or they can be in a pull-out situation, depending on their needs. And we want them to experience the curriculum, but it may not be the same exact content. And grading can be different as well. So we've had students, I know Claire this year created a parallel class with Mrs. Connors where it was aligned to what they were doing. It was just a little bit different, right? Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. So, Kristen and I co-taught a science class together in the past, and what we did is we took her general ed course that she had created and copied it, and then made the adaptations within that copied course and sent it to a small group of students. So their platform looked the same as their peers, but the level of the activities might have been different. One of the things that copying the course allowed us to do was adjust the grading scale the way that Lori had said. So the students were still provided the same grade level content, but the expectations were tailored a little bit lower to meet the students where they're at, but they still use that same rubric that their peers used.
And we just shift down the rubric, right?
Yes.
And we did that in math as well for a student this year. So again, it's all based on data of IEPs, and we're going to talk about data in just a little bit. But on to the next slide. I'm not going to read this for you, but this is just, again, kind of delineating between the three different words that I went over. Okay, on to the next slide. And this, again, is just activities that students can do, environments that change between differentiation, accommodation, modification.
Laura, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I don't know if you'll have an answer specifically for this, but it's something I've been watching on Twitter as teachers are going back. But how do teachers use the opportunity to get to know their students? You said, that's one really important thing is get to know where they're at. And if they're not in an IEP and they're not on a 504, what are the tools that our teachers are using to get to really know their students before we can figure out what sort of differentiation they need?
Sure. So I know when I meet with students, I'm always looking at their state tests, their MAP scores. I am looking at how they did last year. So if I just met them, I want to see how they did last year. Also during our mentoring time, that is a time where we just sit and get to know our students. All the time I'm, spending a couple minutes during each class kind of pulling different students and having conversations and kind of connecting with them. So really building that trusting relationship is crucial to developing the student and helping them access knowledge.
Are we doing anything like pre-reflection? I know reflection is a big part
Yes.
of, the student
Yeah.
profile. So are we having them reflect on, what are the ways you like to learn? Is it a video? Is it
That's the
reading,
kind of
or-
stuff you get a lot in OA,
Okay.
like with Mr. Hicks, and then.
But does it get transferred out to the other teachers then?
So
where-
at the end of each project, usually there's a reflection piece at the end before they post on their blog is to reflect how they did on their product. So that's kind of where they're talking about how did I do? Which part was my favorite part of this project? Which part did I struggle with? Which part did I need a little more help? So kind of looking at how they did and seeing where they.
So the teachers can take that information and use that.
We get I think 2 days a week, we have team time meeting. And the 6th grade team will meet 7th grade. And in those, that's where we can if there's a kid who's struggling or standing out as something, we tend to list, trying to have who struggled recently, who's growing recently, try to cycle through all the people in the 9th grade team time. But a lot of teachers have a student interest survey or some kind of activity you'll do in the beginning part of the year. Full disclosure, I probably didn't read those as well as I did 10 years ago as I do now, because I'm I don't have time for this, I have to get the stuff. But as I've grown to realize that the relationship with the student is far more important than me being super highly organized with every activity, lined out. If I get the kids to care and buy into me, then you can have some sloppiness and chaos and work through it because they're in. But if you don't care about the kid, the minute you make a mistake, everyone's like, ha, Bernie, you screwed up again. So we do a lot of that. Like, we're not gonna have computers for the first week and a half. I don't know how long we're gonna until we get computers. Like, so that's a whole bunch of activities where we just get to learn each other. And that's the big jump from this building to that building. Here, they have 1 or 2 adults who know them very, very well. And so traditionally, when you go from 5th grade to 6th grade, you're now in 7 different classrooms. And that is very different. They don't have that rock to hold on to. So that's what mentoring aims to help, and OA. Like, those 2 pieces of our day, of our schedule, that's where you help to build those relationships. Jeff Hicks is a freak. Like, he can build 150 excellent relationships a year.
In a good way.
In a good way.
you.
Many people can't, like, they can't remember, oh, you play soccer and you play the viola and you love horses, like, but there are, if you take the time to care, and if you have, like, he's all about empathy, like, if that develops, and he will get it with all the kids. Susie, do you have a question?
Yeah, okay, so on a whole, like, different level, I guess, like, as a parent, like, okay, my daughter's adopted, Chinese, so there's really no one else like her that deals with the things that she has to deal with. So, who do I talk to as a parent to help her? I'm sorry, I just
No.
I just know middle school's gonna be so tough, and we just found out she's gonna have another surgery, and
Oh.
honey, I'm so sorry. It's okay.
I know that Lori's,
She's going through things that
Yeah.
other kids don't go through,
So
and
here's
she's
my-
extremely good about, I'm fine.
She needs to have a point person, and I really encourage people, my students, to find that advocacy person, someone they really trust. Funny story in my family, I have someone that adopted somebody from China. So connect with me, but that's what you look for. There are other people like that, and you just reach out, ask questions. I'm very lucky that I get to see my students a little more frequently because they are on plans,
Right.
educational plans. So I also have a basic skills time. But if a student needs to have lunch with one of us, I'm always like, come sit with me.
Mrs. Corey's down with that too.
Yeah, and Miss Corey, yes.
Mrs. Corey's, she's,
Last year.
Right, so there are people, and I think if she's not comfortable going to them initially, maybe send an email. Would she be okay to send an
Yeah,
email?
I think she's comfortable going, but she won't admit to
Yeah.
things and issues. Like, she is all about flying under the radar. Like, she does whatever she can to stay right in the middle. Like, even soccer, her coach is like, you are nowhere near playing up to your potential, and she's like, Like, she wants to be like lost in the crowd.
Just want to
And
stand out. And
does not
I
want to
hate
stand
to
out.
say it, but I think that this generation of kids don't want to look like they're excelling.
Yeah.
Like, I see that,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's her.
don't you see that with a lot of students?
Yeah.
They don't want to look like they
the
know
worst insult they
everything.
call each other is try hard.
They-
You're a
yes.
try
I'm
hard.
totally
I've
serious.
never heard that before.
It's
Yeah.
the
No,
worst.
it's sad.
It's awful.
I'm hoping to say with maturity, that does fade away because I have some older children and that's what I saw.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed, keep, and we will keep encouraging and celebrating greatness. We want to see our students' best work, not their quickest work, not fly under the radar work. We really want to see, and if you're here now, we want to push you to here. It's you against yourself. It shouldn't be you against all your peers.
I would say the other thing is, if she can go to Mrs. Corey, and maybe talk to Mrs. Corey about it. The counselors often like to have like groups of kids who share similar struggles. Maybe they could make a group that meets during the Thursday mentoring communities. Like, that's kind of like on a different issue, but that's why we started like a K Straight Alliance, was to like, we recognize all these kids just need a place to hang out and be together. Maybe she can, like Mrs. Nagy is a kindness club for high school kids. I don't know if there's a kindness club for elementary, or not elementary, middle school yet.
Girls,
Yeah, they had
girls
some.
on the run, and then she also did, there was something.
So I would reach out to Mrs. Corey and say, hey, maybe we can find a group, because the whole point of our Thursday community is no tech, sit and talk to people who just wanna talk about the same kind of stuff that you do. Like, and that's again where we build relationships, like it's another, and it's different, like Brian Weir's fantasy sports one is huge. I mean, it's a whole bunch of 12 and 13-year-old dudes primarily, right? But he can connect well, like that's another way we can build connections. So I would email Mrs. Corey, or come in and talk to her. I think she's actually there now.
And
so
Mrs.
go
Dill
ahead.
did book club, right? There was like a morning book club, and I don't know how that's gonna function with the loss of our library, if there'll be anything like that, but I feel like that's another empathy building, small group, community based, yeah, I'm all about book clubs.
I highly recommend parents to reach out. Like, if you're seeing something that maybe someone just isn't noticing, tell us, because we wanna help, we wanna be there and provide support where we can.
You just took a huge step because there are two ladies to your right
Yeah.
who see you and hear you.
Yeah.
So-
And the other nice thing is that, like with the mentoring, it's a lot harder to fly under the radar, because we are meeting with these kids regularly, and it's a small group of kids even within our room, so you don't have the classroom of 25, 30 kids, it's half of that. And the kids do, like, they really open up a lot more, and, you get a lot more out of them. They'll stop in the morning for, office hours, kind of, a lot of them more just to talk to you than even just to work on the work. So I think that it's a lot harder to fly under the radar, but definitely, we'll talk. We'll talk after this, but
And I'm
I
glad
think
you're
you'll be
here,
happy
so,
with
yeah.
the transition that she's
No,
made.
it's great.
Yeah.
So the chart that you saw before is kind of a visual of things that we do, a ton of stuff. I'm gonna highlight just a couple things that Summit helps us provide some supports for, and some things I bring in myself, and things that they use as well. So we definitely target executive functions. A lot of our students struggle with this, and we're gonna go into what that looks like. I'm gonna talk about data and what kind of data we look at to help meet our students where they're at. I'm gonna talk about vocabulary and supports that we help with providing for our students to access the vocabulary that's difficult. And then other supports, sentence stems, graphic organizers, being able to pick the right resource to help with their learning. And not all students know immediately what the right resource is for themselves when they're doing a focus area. Some, want to look at just the videos, but maybe videos are too fast for them. Maybe they need to look at the slides and do the check for understanding. So we help align those resources, especially in 6th grade. They really walk them through and show them all those resources. And then really important to reflect, revise, edit, and then launch the project again. It's really important to know that students can go back and revise a project any time in the year, send their teacher an email and say, I'd like to fix this. I want to work on the areas that I didn't quite meet where I was, and I'm gonna resubmit. And that's perfectly fine. They can improve their score, all right? So learning from failures. Not only are the students learning from failures, but our teachers are as well. And I know we have really evolved from the first year until this year, going into our 4th year using Summit. We have really changed and evolved in what we need to make it better and better every single year.
We even differentiate the amount of failure different kids will experience.
Right.
Like some like super bullheaded, cocky 9th graders, like, oh, I got this, I don't need you on. I will let them fall flat on their face in the beginning of 1st quarter, because they need to learn that there's a reason why we're all here, all these adults in their life. We are here to help you succeed and thrive. Yes, I know you're, 15 years old now, but we need to help them figure out that all the adults in life are a valuable asset. There are some kids who I know if they get a 6 or 7 on a focus area, it's gonna be a bad day. So that's where we learn the kids from many, many interactions. And so that we differentiate how much failure some kids can have. Some kids were like, hey, fine, you're gonna learn this one the hard way. Like not be eligible for football, or not be able to wrestle the entire, whatever, those kinds of things. We're like, fine, this is, it's real.
Struggle is important.
Struggle, that's where the learning happens.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people don't like the everybody gets a trophy mentality that pervades much of America today. We don't want everybody to have a trophy. We want everyone to have an opportunity to earn a trophy at some point. And it'll be legit and real, instead of, oh, you made it through the whole season, congratulations. So that was hard for me to differentiate failure, because some people need different failure than others. And it took me a long time to kind of get that. We even did that the first year we had no one fail 9th grade, and that was exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And then the year after that, we're like, we're gonna break some eggs for these omelets. And then, so we've evolved in how those things work.
So this is sort of what our students, it's a depiction of what our students kind of go through who struggle with executive functions. There's really 5 or 6 areas that the processes that they struggle in, which would be goal setting, being flexible, organizing and prioritizing, sequencing, accessing working memory, and monitoring themselves on where they are in a project. So our students struggle and can't get going. But on the platform, this is an example of how we accommodate for executive functions and how our students can be more and more independent. So we've talked about the weekly view and how students can actually go in and chunk their work. They can, and maybe we can even pull this up.
The demo?
Well, first, can you click on the project timeline, please? So in my classes, I often will put together a timeline for my students so they kind of see an overview other than the overview on Summit. I like to provide them a color-coded something just to kind of help them see where are we going, where's the end product, where does this align with the date, and what knowledge do I need to learn by this point. So I do this for my big projects in each of my classes to help them see the big picture. Can you make it a little bigger, please? Thank you so much. Any questions on that? So it's a little bit different than the year view, but it kind of just breaks up a project into the checkpoints.
It's like a single class year view.
Yeah, it's one single class. I think sometimes my students get overwhelmed seeing all their classes, all the checkpoints, everything at once. So I try to do something like this just to help them break it up a little bit.
Is there a way for kids who aren't in your class that struggle with that aspect of it to deal with that outside of your intervention classrooms that may be sort of on the ends, but maybe a little closer to the middle, but still have that issue?
I would ask the teacher for one of those.
Okay.
Just email the teacher. I'm happy to send you a copy of what I do and say, can you create something like this for my student?
I think most teachers also do something like that
Okay.
within their classrooms for the bulk of our projects.
Yeah.
Just because we see how a lot of the kids do get overwhelmed by looking at it all at once. I get overwhelmed by looking at it all at once. So most of the time, we will give them something that is broken down into smaller chunks, just because we're not all used to working on projects that take 6 weeks. You know what I mean? It's much easier to compartmentalize it as this week, 2 days, this is what you're doing. Next week, 2. So we usually break it down for them in the bulk of the classes anyways.
So a lot of us, I think all of us, have a today in whatever class Google slide that we strongly recommend that kids access. So Lori had this one. This is the English 9 one. And so every single day it says, what are we doing today in English, or today in biology, or today in algebra? We tell the kids day 1, you should bookmark this. Like, so this is another, and we just use the same presentation and just add a slide every single day. It's something that I plan to email out to all of my parents, like the first week of tour school. So you're like, okay, if your kid's like, what'd you do in class today? Nothing. Oh, really? Let's check Mr. Greening's today in biology. Oh, it looks like you did this really cool cube activity. Can you tell me about that? Like, so we chunk it up even by day, and then if you can see here, this is what it is. Who's doing what? I mean, this is a random day. This is for February 25th. Like, just what's going on in that day, and it's a super good way for the kid if you're out of school to know what you missed, and specifically what you should be working on in class. We tell the kids all the time they have to have goals. We have goals for them, and it's not just the Wide West, like, oh, figure out what you have to do. We set the goals. We have an agenda. They'll have to have different goals if they're well behind or well ahead.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is it's encouraged by all of our teachers on all of our teams to take this approach. Am I right in saying that? So,
I think we presented to the staff on this, I don't know, yeah, probably once or twice.
so if we email, hey, where's the today and whatever slide, they're not gonna look at us like we're cuckoo.
I don't think everybody does it. Like, some people just write it on the board, but to me, a lot of us write it on the board as well.
Okay.
The classes I'm in, I know it gets done because
it's super easy, and then like, you walk in, and I'll even say, you need
It
your
makes
computer,
sense.
you don't need your computer. Like, so it tells you exactly what you need to do. This is the one piece that like Summit doesn't have, like, so it's real simple. You just make one Google slide, and then you use it. I even have it today in mentoring, like who am I meeting with in mentoring, and what, like if there's a survey we have to do or something, like it's just easy, and then it conditions the kids to walk in, they go, okay, I got this, and then they go from there.
And Kelly, you can always email me, you know, all of my students
You and I
are,
are gonna be best friends.
all my students are in the same classes that your son will be in.
Okay,
So I have the same needs that I
Okay.
need to provide and opportunities for my students. I can share things with you.
okay,
It's
thank you.
it's awesome. That's what it's about, is sharing what our students need to help them succeed.
Well, and there's just so many good tips that are coming out of this. I mean, I know I'm supposed to be here for my younger kid, but I'm here for both of them. And, you know, there's new things you guys are doing every year that we need to be aware of and advocate for too as well. So that's great.
This is what I do Sunday nights, is I make my today in biology, like as I'm watching hopefully the Browns win this year. You know, I finish up my today in biology and I look at, okay, I use the data, okay, how many kids are here and how many, Colleen is the absolute rock star of using data to like make groups in algebra. And we try to figure out who needs what, who will be in what group, all those kinds of things. That's how I, you know, daily plan now. I don't daily plan, this is my agenda, see what happens. We can easily go back and figure out what's going on. And we'll put groups, like we'll say, hey, these are your groups. Mondays should be a little different, because Mondays is a shortened class time. So on Mondays, that's when I tell the kids, these are your goals for the whole week. Write them down. And the kids who don't do that, like it's frustrating.
Well, there is that little gap that exists, right?
And there are kids that refuse, and a refusal, even if I sit right next to them, then, and the parent will ask, and I said, your child refused, your student refused, I'm sorry, so.
And that's where some
And
of
we
those
just-
ninth grade boys need to.
I document that,
Okay,
so.
okay.
Okay, on to the next one, how to use data. So, I'm not gonna go through all of these, but this is a list of the data that I look at, it's a lot. So, I know that all of these datas are just a snapshot. It's really a big picture that I wanna look at, and those conversations I have with the student. But this helps with the picture, it helps. So, one thing I want you to do, if you don't mind, can you click on the data from Project Rubrics? It's gonna take you to the demo. Can you show quickly how we sort kids? Please?
Oh,
Sort
yeah,
students?
so
Thank
we,
you.
and this is the piece that, this is the piece that non-educators, it's harder for them to like understand why Seamless loves Summit so much. So if I go as a teacher, and you want me to like go assign a project, that kind of thing?
Just how you can, you know, when you go under Learners tab, I believe, yeah.
I think you have to be in a
You have to
project.
be in a project, and then you can look at specific cognitive skills.
So we can go and look at learners, and I can make a group. And I can say, oh, I'm gonna make a group for something I need to work on, and I can start from suggestions, and that's where they're using all of their past data. I think it's only from my class, not from previous years. And if they have scored in these ranges, it will automatically group kids so that I can make a little, all right, today we need to work on asking questions cognitive skills. Some of you didn't do so well last time, some of you are rocking. So then I can divide these kids up by how they have scored. We can't do this in the beginning of the year because we don't have that data yet. And then I can make these groups. And in the past, that would be extraordinarily time consuming to go through and figure out, okay, who's doing poorly at this skill versus that skill. So that's how we can do this fairly easily. We can do it on focus areas, like what kids are doing well on a focus area, like this is already grouped them, taking it 2 times, 1 time, almost there. So we can chunk the kids.
They need a reteach. I would
Yeah.
pull a small group and sit with them and say, we're gonna go over this as a group with some direct instruction, and then they'll try it again.
And we can even, it looks like this, we can even sort by map skills. So if we know that someone, like a group of kids have a lower reading level, we can find alternative texts. Like what's that, Newsela? I don't know how to
Yeah,
pronounce it.
that's
So,
it, Newsela.
Newsela is excellent. I can get an article And I can get it, I can download it for 3 different levels, and then I can assign it to the different groups of like where the kids are at, so they don't stumble as much through some new stuff.
And connected text is definitely one thing that it's choice or one of those strategies that I highly recommend all teachers to do. So when a student really is not grasping information, connecting other text to that information helps them with a deeper understanding and deeper learning of that material.
But this tool is fairly new, and so the vast majority of staff doesn't know how to use this yet. I'm guessing in some of our early collaboration times, we'll be showing people like, how does this work? Like, what are the summit updates that we can do this? Maybe you can even have like differentiate that between the intervention specialists, so they can get like a deeper dive and everyone else.
Yep.
But this is why this is how we should be using technology. Not technology as babysitters. Technology is a powerful tool to be able to get more information and then use that information.
And this is more data than we've ever been able to like sort and kind of group, and it's really awesome that we're able to do this quickly. So if you go back to my slides, other thing I just want to quickly highlight is the student skill profile wheel, which I kind of added at the bottom, and it covers those 9 skills, as well as the model that we use for the quadrants. We really are looking for these as well. So getting to know a student, I might look on their blog and see what kind of submissions of work have they put on there from before, and how well have they done, or where are they at, what supports do they need, just by looking at some of their work that they've done already.
So this rigor relevance framework, I think there's posters of it in everybody's classroom.
Yeah.
Bill Daggett, who came up with this years ago, actually came to the district. I don't know if any of us were working there then. Kristen, were you there?
Yeah, it might have been.
Not calling you old, you saying you were there.
I was there.
It was my first year.
So this is the educational model. Like old school, this is multiple choice like learning. Just like, can you regurgitate stuff you've had? We are moving kids towards quadrant D. You may hear some of, especially like Mrs. Whiteman will talk about quadrant D, or at board meetings, or at teachers. Like, we're trying to get kids to apply knowledge, like if you look at these, the creating, evaluating, we're really trying to push them, because these are the skills that are worthwhile after high school. As Shelley said in that video, like Industrial Revolution wanted kids to be cogs in a machine, and we want kids to create their own machines. Now it's a totally different mindset. So this quadrant D. Now, we can't forget these other levels right here, and sometimes I just want to jump and swim in the quadrant D pool, and you got to wade through these other stuff before we get there.
Where would you put the focus areas?
I would put focus areas down around here, like the AAC type stuff.
Yep.
And project-based learning, like that's why we have project-based learning within FBCS, is to do quadrant D level work. And for those of you who are super bored, you can go look at all the state tests that are coming out now. The questions are getting much more quadrant D-like than quadrant A-like. They are not just...
How would it work on a state test?
So they give you, like, in science, it's crazy. Like, they'll give you a situation, and then you'll have to, like, actually make the graph and interpret the graph. It's not just which of these graphs show the data. You have to, like, move the stuff. Since they have the technology, the test is interactive. And that's the, like, even the ACT, like, I don't know if you heard me say this, but I proctored the ACT a couple years ago. I worked in cancer research for 5 years. There was a question on there about cancer that I knew absolutely nothing about. And it wasn't about, do you recall this information? Can you give some very brand new information you've probably never been exposed to, and then use it to come up with something? And so that's, even the people are like, what about standardized testing? This standardized tests have evolved more so than most education systems have, because they don't want you just to teach the test. They want kids to be able to do this level quadrant D stuff. And so it is, especially the bio test, there is a whole bunch of moving things around and lining things up with boxes. And we, in response to that, there's a website called Gizmos that the 8th and 9th grade science teachers are using. And you can do like digital labs and move things around and play with variables and all, because it's exactly like what they're seeing on these tests. They're not just bubble the right answer. Like that is gone.
There are constructed responses, there are
Yeah.
written responses.
Yeah, and then you'll have to put some other stuff in there. So I mean, not that we're teaching to the test, but my first goal is make sure everybody graduates, right? So graduate and be awesome at like living in 21st century. Like, if you don't graduate, who cares if you, like, we gotta get you there. Next one, Lauren?
Yes, please. All right, so how do students develop these self-advocacy skills? This is a whole list of stuff. I've kind of touched on some of these already, but like post-it note utilization, if a student really doesn't even know where to start, they're kind of overwhelmed, I will write 1 or 2 things down, little box next to it, just to help them kind of have blinders and say, these are the 2 things I want you to do. Maybe put a time frame next to it. This will take you 10 minutes, this should take about 5. So they have an idea of what they need to do right now, and chunk it for them. Emailing teachers, set timers to help manage time, color coding things, a first I need you to get this task done, then you can have 5 minutes of a preferred activity. And asking for feedback is very important. We want our students to interact with their feedback and be able to grow from their feedback, like a glow and a grow. This is what you did really awesome at. This is where you still need to kind of grow a little bit. And then using the Google Chrome store, there's lots of extensions for our students to utilize. Grammarly is fantastic. I highly recommend all students have that on their computer. Speech to text, text to speech. Those are all things that can help them benefit when, especially writing papers.
And they're free.
And they're free, absolutely.
And a lot of the 6th graders are just learning this, so, you know, they all think they're really good at doing their work and listening to music at the same time, but a lot of them quickly learn that maybe, well, we let them learn, that they aren't really so good at that. And so, you know, for some students, they do work better with music on in the background, and we'll let them listen to music while they're writing a paper or something, but you have other students that wanna try it. We let them try it, but if it's not working for them, we give them other suggestions, like maybe let's do a post-it note that, so, you know, each student learns in a different way, and in 6th grade, a lot of that is learning how they learn, because a lot of them at this point don't really know how they learn or how they learn best. So we're kind of trying to teach them and help them to discover, how do I work best?
All right, next slide. So vocabulary, this Summit platform for students who struggle with language can be very dense for vocabulary. And my job is to help them access that vocabulary. This is an example of a rubric that I sort of modified. So if you click on that very top link, please, Bruning, I've added picture supports and I bolded some key words that I want my students to focus on. So they can now see, oh, that's what that really means. So this is the one I created for a project, Dividing Self. And then my rubric is on top, and the rubric for the project is down below, because I still want them to be able to compare and access that as well. And a lot of times, this just helps them understand what those expectations are for the vocabulary.
Is there a rubric for does every teacher do a rubric for every assignment?
So Summit Learning,
Project?
Summit Learning has something called the cognitive skills, and that already is embedded into Summit Learning. So the rubrics are already in Summit Learning.
It's the same rubric, it's developed by Stanford, I don't know how many years old it is, it's been around the block for a while. And they will progress through, from 6th grade through whenever their teachers, 12th grade, there's 12th grade English. They progress through this rubric right here, so 6th graders are expected to be able to get a 2, right? Like we're, 6th grade is
That's
2
passing, 2 to 4.
2 to 4. So by the time they get up to me and Colleen in 9th grade, they're to be 3.5 to 5.5. So everyone uses the same rubric for English, social studies, and science. Math is different, so math has, because math, is different. But they use the same language. The same language they see in 6th grade in English, science, social studies is the same. It builds all the way through. So this is an exposure to, as Lori said, the vocab's tough, but this is the level of vocab that we know kids struggle with on standardized tests.
Yeah.
Like no one really not too many kids are reading words with these kinds of words in them. There's probably because it's dull. So we're really making sure they know this level of vocab.
And they're gonna see it in every single class, and they're gonna see it every single year. So having
And every
these-
single project.
And every single project. So they're gonna see the same, like being able to identify a theme or a central idea. You're gonna see that in a social studies class, an English class, I think science as well.
So it's more like generalized, like this is just what's expected and this follows, it's not like, specific to each project, like
True,
you're gonna
true.
get, okay.
And the real struggle for me early on was, maybe this is probably true for Kristen as well. The rubric does not highlight what science knowledge do you have. Like, the rubric is more, how do you demonstrate knowledge? How do you figure out what the main idea is? And so, you could write an excellent paper, but your science knowledge could be wrong. In the
Right.
beginning, I didn't know how to assess that. Now it's really simple. I just say, hey, you need to fix this. And I just don't accept it until they fix it, because we have the ability to do that.
And that might be like their evidence is not where it needs to be.
Yeah,
So
so
that
like-
could be under the evidence, cognitive.
A huge part of social studies are document-based questions, where they have to read a document and figure out, like, the Constitution, whatever. They have to read those things and say, what does that mean? Well, that's the same thing that they have to do in science. They have to read an article and say, what does this mean, or what's the important fact here? So the rubric will say, like, I forget, explanation of evidence, and using resources. So I can use the same exact words in the rubric in different courses. Ideally, like, when we get really good at this, I would love to have more of our projects. Like Kelly and I talked about having a math science overlap project, and English, social studies, science, where we've been trying to figure out, like, what book could we read for all ninth graders, like, so then you're actually using the exact same thing in all of the classes, and that's really where we'd like to go with a lot of this, is so you're not doing 3 projects, you're doing 1 project in 3 classes that is super deep and awesome.
So last year in 9th grade, English, we were reading Of Mice and Men, which is about the Dust Bowl era, but also they were learning about that in their social studies class at the same time, which was really cool that it aligned and they were able to pull from information from both of those. So,
Aren't you guys doing that with 6th grade with some of the books, like the summer reading, isn't that?
I'm not combining with science.
Oh, okay, gotcha,
But I believe, they have some project going that's yes.
okay.
Like,
They're
that,
working at an 08 also.
that's what the kids need to realize, like, oh, I don't have to do this kind of math and science. Like, you do. Like, never in the
Right.
real world do you use your knowledge in silos. Like, it's not like you go to work someday, I'm like, I'm only gonna write a paragraph today. Like that's,
Right.
and that's a skill that it takes a while for them to realize, like, oh, we have to do math and science, or we have to write paragraphs in math. Yes, because when you can write a paragraph about why this equation makes sense, then you really understand that concept. And that's rough. That's rough for kids to make those kinds of connections.
okay. Back to the vocabulary thing, thank you. So this is just a list of other things that I've provided. Again, this is kind of a short list. I provide whatever they need. If they need a printed copy, I print a copy. If they need to have modified rubrics and a grading scale, I know Claire did that in her class. If we need to do some direct instruction on a base, prefix, suffix, on some tough words, we do that. We do whatever they need to help them gain that vocabulary. If we need anchor charts in the classroom, we provide anchor charts. So, okay, on to the next
The kids
one.
use a lot of, what are those, Quizlets? What's the app?
Oh yeah, Quizlet. For the flashcards.
The digital flash, I don't think they're as effective as real flashcards, because you can slip into Clash of Clans very easily with Quizlet.
Don't tell
I'm
me.
just giving them the,
All right, providing supports and resources to match learning styles. And this again, this goes back to that universal design for learning, making sure that students are making choices that are right for their learning styles. The first one, if you could click on simplify directions, this shows you an example of where the directions were really broken down for this project of understanding theme and showing theme. There was a picture support, there was bold words, there was highlighted, just to help that student understand specifically what is being asked of them. Okay, so there's a lot of graphics in the resources under the checkpoints and the additional information.
These are available for all students.
Yeah, all
It's-
students. Yeah. Can
Everybody
you
gets
open
the
up the
option.
demo as a teacher in a project, please?
okay.
And under a project, could you show them, let's go to
Plans or,
kind of where the additional resources are of a project. So pick a project at the top.
I'm in the overview. This project might not have as much.
Oh, yeah, if you
Go
do
to
it.
checkpoint.
Don't you have to be in it as a kid? See the difference?
No.
No.
Resources for
There you
everyone,
go,
yeah.
yeah, so there are always a ton of resources, and if we know a specific student needs a specific resource, we can even assign it to them, saying, this is part of your assignment, you need to do this, you need to make sure you access this. And we can make sure that they open it, and if I need to print it, I print it, no big deal. Okay,
And the kid, no one knows who gets what, like, this is all done digitally, it's, like, we can call, it can have the same name, they can open the document, and no one knows who's got the modified, the accommodated, the whatever. And to me, this is pretty awesome. I was talking with, there was a parent who's like, well, my kid never did this before, and I talked with their 8th grade teacher, and yeah, they did, they were doing this, they didn't know it was modified because it's just in there, and it doesn't look any different, and to me, I just make it, I think it's easier for the kids, everyone gets an opportunity to learn, and they don't know, you don't see the pink paper versus the white paper, everyone just gets it.
I know I'm going over time, but there's a lot of cool stuff that I'm almost done. So the next thing, if you can go back to the slide we were on, click on the outline with leveled supports. So in our classes, we often provide different level activities for our students, and this is an example of a mild activity that I would use for a student who struggles with writing. It tells exactly what part of the paragraph they're working on, what they need to do, their expectation, and then it gives them some sentence stems to help them fill in the information that they need. The medium is less support, and then the high, the spicy level, would be not much support at all, just the first column kind of telling them what they need to know, and then they do the writing. Okay, just to give you an idea. Thank you.
So we have the ability, like if there's a kid we think is able to do spicy, we may not assign them mild.
Yeah, we won't even let them see it, we just say you're
We
doing
said,
this
no,
one.
that's not appropriate for you, we're gonna push, because everyone's like, well, how do you make sure kids get challenged? We give them only the
Yeah.
challenging documents, we don't give them, the easy ones. And again, these are things that is our evolution of using the platform. Not everyone gets, we're there because this is year 4 for us, so some people aren't, that's where they're going there.
All right, back to the slides. The next link, if you can click on the focus area flowchart. So when I first started doing Summit, I was like, I need a visual. I don't get this. And I really pushed for this. And Miss Nagy and I worked together. And so there's a couple of these out there. So we have visual flowcharts to help our students understand where they need to go when they're doing content assessments. They need to open it, they need to take the pre-assessment, then they get a score of what they know already and where they still have some struggles, and it kind of guides them on what materials they should open. And I know in 6th grade, they go through a lot of these in class, right?
Yes.
So this is really, by the time they get to 8th and 9th grade, I do need to walk them through again to remind them, but we gradually release by the end of the year and hoping that they're more independent and choosing the right resource for them. So, does anybody want me to go through what that looks like on the focus area page?
Just do this dance.
Let's do it. Woo! So I can do that at the end because I still have a couple more things if you want to see what that looks like and how, and I can even see when a student clicks on a resource. A lot of times they're like, oh, I'm ready to take the or the content assessment at the end. I'm like, you didn't click on any of these resources. How can you be ready? So that's good data for me. They'll say, oh, I know this already. I'm like, no, your pre-assessment says you don't know this. So we're really good about checking that data to help decide if they're ready or not. Also in Summit, there's something called Learning Strategies. In Summit Learning, this kind of shows how to do Cornell notes, gives some step-by-step instructions. If a student doesn't know quite how to work together with their peers, it gives them ideas on what to do, test anxiety, things like that. It's really cool, and these are something that you can do at home with your student. Just open it up, have conversations about it, or practice one of these. Hey, let's do Cornell notes for this. I want to see you practice this skill. This is how you do it. So all students have access to this learning strategies. Okay, thank you. Also, teachers have access to something called Habits of Success, and I know we talked about that before, and again, we're implementing and kind of embedding that into all of our classwork as well. And we also have something called Accessibility Resource Bank, which is sort of a list of all kinds of skills and strategies and tools we can use with students who struggle. And Summit created this because there was a big push of intervention teachers who said, we need this. We need to have things for all teachers to kind of have at our fingertips. And the intervention teacher is not always available for all classes at all times, so this is a nice resource for all teachers to kind of look at.
I think more of these things we can assign to kids easier too.
We can, absolutely. So, also the environment, making sure flexible seating. If a student really does not work well in a situation, we move them to the front of the classroom, making sure they're closer to the instruction. And if we need to reteach, do flexible grouping for that. All right, on to our next one. This is just a picture of kind of what I see students go through. The stuff under the water is kind of the cycle of what it takes. They need to persevere, they sometimes fail, they are disappointed, often want to give up, but through good habits, hard work, and dedication, we see that they can gain that success at the top. All right,
Just
and
make huge posters of this.
isn't it cool? I know, I love it.
I think the ratio's off, it's only 1/10 to 9/10, but
You're my biology person. So, learning from failures is one of those new things that we're really helping students understand, that we struggle and we learn as adults. And it is okay to struggle and get through that process by reflecting, revising, editing, and then launching it again. I print hard copies. I ask students to take pictures. You know, if they're ones who lose their work frequently, take a picture of it and make sure that you share that picture with your teacher so we know you did it. Sentence stems we talked about. I even have a project in my basic skills called What the Summit. One of our great teachers in the past created a project on how to access the Summit platform. So there's lots of, if a student's like, I'm really struggling how to do this, I might even assign a part of that project to them and help them understand where to find that in Summit. And just making those adjustments that we need to help our students be more independent to succeed, picking what they need to succeed and be growth mindset students, so they're learning constantly. The next poster is just the growth mindset, and that's kind of one of those key words we talk about frequently. And then the last one is my good friend Shelly Moore in a really cool video I want to end with.
is she a friend of the book?
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, helpful videos in 5 minutes or less that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Shelly Moore, and this episode is The End of Average. Today, I have to give a really big shout out to Todd Rose because our episode is based around a story that he tells in his book, The End of Average. Go buy this book, go read this book. This book totally helped me understand not only my own tumultuous experience in school, but also my understanding of how to approach curriculum as a teacher. Because what I realized after reading this book is that the idea of should is a direct connection to the concept of average and our ongoing fight against the green. Todd Rose talks about average in the book and actually mentions it as being a very useful concept when comparing large groups of one dimension. Like, for example, if you're comparing the height of a Canadian and comparing that to the average height of an American, that's a great use of average. Big sample size, comparing one dimension. Education, however, isn't that simple. First of all, we're not comparing groups to each other. We're comparing individuals to a group. Second, those individuals that we're comparing are not one-dimensional. People are not just height. Not even paper is one-dimensional. To prove this point further, Todd Rose tells a story about airplanes. In the 1950s, fighter jet pilots, they weren't performing well, and some were even getting injured in their cockpits because they were getting jostled around a little bit. They weren't able to reach for the controls effectively to help them make those split-second decisions needed to operate a plane that's flying like at 1 billion miles an hour. Something just had to be done. So a very smart Air Force researcher went and found 4,000 pilots and took their measurements, the length of their arms and their legs, the width of their hips and their shoulders, 10 dimensions in total, to try and use that data to design a better cockpit for the pilots. Now, in the age of standardization, we could simply just average these measurements and design a perfectly standardized plane. Most people are average, right? Well, you tell me, how many of those 4,000 pilots do you think would fit into an average plane? Just give me a ballpark. 0, none, nada. Not one of those pilots could fit because not one of those 4,000 pilots had the exact combination of all the measurements in every dimension. The average plane was being designed for a mythical green pilot. Now, another solution might be to use those measurements and design custom-made individualized planes for every pilot. That would totally work. It just might not be the most cost-effective option though. Okay, so what do? One individualized plane for every pilot won't work, and one standardized plane for all pilots also isn't working. Is there another option? Well, that very smart researcher realized the solution. It wasn't the average measurements of the dimensions that was needed to design the plane, it was the range of dimensions. Because using a range, the planes could become adjustable. How many pilots can fit into a plane that's adjustable? Every single one. It's the reason why we have adjustable seats in our cars. Because you can't just chop off someone's legs if they're too tall, it's so messy. Okay, now let's think about this in terms of curriculum. For years and years and years, we have been struggling with exactly the same problem. We've been trying to fit students into a standardized curricular plane. The error, though, is, and the assumption in both of these scenarios, is that the plane or the curriculum is static, and that it's the pilots and the students that are malleable. The reality is that no one actually fits. We have designed curriculum for mythical green students based on averages of multi-dimensional people. Now, just like a plane, it's not cost-effective or efficient to design individualized, custom-made curriculum for every individual student, but we're also realizing that it's also impossible to have one standardized curriculum for every individual student. It is quite the dilemma. But what if we approached it in the same way? What if we stopped looking at the average and instead started to look at the range of our learners? What are their dimensions? But not in terms of what's missing, but instead, what do they bring? What are their stories? What are their histories? Or as my good friend Leighton calls it, their funds of knowledge. How do we find out and use what our students bring in all of their dimensions and design a curriculum that's adjustable just for them? This type of curriculum would allow all students to be successful. Every single one. But here's the kicker. In this part really got me. I was thinking about this one day and I was imagining a pilot like crawling into an adjustable plane. And I asked myself, who's making these adjustments? And then it hit me, the pilot. The pilot is making the adjustments. And then when I started thinking about my own students and I realized, wait a second, who's making the adjustments for them? It wasn't them, it was me. I was making the adjustments, the teacher. You know, we talk all the time about growth mindset and student agency, self-regulation of learning, and I realized that this is it. This is what we're talking about. How do we teach students to make the adjustments that they need so that they can fly the plane? We have been so focused on trying to get kids to fit into the plane that we've totally forgotten that fitting into the plane isn't even the goal. The goal is to fly it, to fly the plane. It's our job to teach them how to make the adjustments that they need. Once they figure that out, they can take that plane wherever they want. So this, my friends, is our job. How do we design an adjustable plane? How do we make curriculum responsive to our specific group of learners? There could be a billion answers to those questions. I'll leave you with this. What are you already doing? How are you already getting to know your learners, making adjustable curriculum, finding success for every single learner? This is the question I'll leave you with today. But then I'll say, are you ready to see the end of average?
Just let that sink in for a minute. I think that Summit Learning provides us this opportunity to give our students choices to adjust their education and learn how to be independent in making those choices and adjustments so that they are prepared to go out into a job someday and into the community and be successful. So I really like Shelley Moore, as you can see. If you have any questions, please feel free to email.
Strongly recommend that
Yeah.
book.
Please feel free to email, text, whatever you need.
That's it.
Or he has a TED Talk, which won't take you. It takes about,
The Shelley
well, she talked about, I thought you meant Todd Rose.
Yeah, Todd
Yeah.
Rose.
The TED Talks are awesome. They're too long. I couldn't show the whole TED Talks on all of these. You can let him come in. I know he wants to come in. It's fine. Because we're finishing up. But she really is incredible. So if you have students who have diverse needs, her research is incredible. This is my little dude.
And this is where very few teachers were taught this mindset. And this is where we're changing. Fewer parents have been exposed to the we don't care about average mindset. All of us have, like, I don't know, we all embrace this now. We kind of see things the same way. I think that's why we were put on the 6th and 9th grade teams when this all started. So it's easy. We're in that stage of our journey. We're helping everyone else on that journey, and they're getting there. They're absolutely getting there. But that End of Average book changed me a lot. So Dr. Wagner told me to read that, and I did, and actually tweeted, and Todd Rose tweeted me back. So super excited.
Thank you guys. Thank you
Thank
so much
you
for
again
being
for
here.
coming.
We have real life 6th grade teachers here too, if you have 6th grade specific questions. Did we finish early?